Hey everyone, it's Veiled Shot back at it with another Awaken Chaos Era video, and as you saw from our intro, I got a lot of requests regarding team compositions, specifically pertaining to Void Tower Hard, because I did release a video on clearing Void Tower Hard for the first time on this main free-to-play account, which is really exciting, and I pretty much used one main comp with minor variations throughout the whole last half of Void Tower Hard, which was pretty awesome. So I'm going to give you some free-to-play replacements for that team and some things I would suggest, and then also another composition that I used earlier on in my first half of Void Tower. So if you are enjoying this content, be sure to leave a like, drop a comment down below, and subscribe to the channel, and let's go ahead and head over to my collection. So first things first, my initial Void Tower comp that I used to clear the first about 50 floors of Void Tower was basically a Windstrex burst comp. Now, at that time, I actually did not have Windstrex, so I used Connor as a replacement. And so the reason why we're using Connor or Windstrex is mainly because the attack buff up. Now, Windstrex makes it much easier because you also get that speed up, but Connor can easily work as well, and I will explain in just a moment. So, what does the Windstrex burst comp actually comprise of? Well, you really just want Windstrex or Connor in that first slot. You could also use Brand in Connor's spot, typically. And then you're just going to want 3 damage dealers. So typically for me, it would be Mathesia, Zatlux, and then Tia. Now, if you happen to have a Tia, I would definitely build her out with damage if you're using this comp, because you really do want that fluff damage. She doesn't do a crazy amount, but she does do quite a bit. And she also applies that freeze, which ups your other character's damage quite a bit. And then I had Mathesia go, and then Zatlux to clear up anyone who was left. And then, of course, down here, as I mentioned, we're going to be using Connor or Windstrex. So Windstrex makes this much easier because she has the speed up. So you don't really have to tank through that initial hit. The bonus with, Windstrex, of course, also is that you have an ultimate reset here, which makes it much easier to kind of go through your initial burst and then reset, maybe a Zatlux, maybe a Mathesia, maybe a Tia, whoever you're using. Use your ultimates again, and then finish them off with that second round of damage. Again, she gets that speed buff up, which makes it so that you don't even have to worry about your characters, getting hit, which is really excellent. Connor, on the other hand, has the shield on his second ability here. So if you build him with high attack for Void Tower, he's going to get a good shield on your units, so you can actually tank that first initial hit and then just clear them up on the second round of hits. Or, maybe that your characters are slower than them, so you can put up that buff and then just tank that initial hit, which is very doable, although it makes it quite a bit harder if you do have Connor. I ended up using Connor until stage 63, and at 63 it was quite difficult for me because I just could not get enough damage through Connor. I needed too many spells because I wasn't able to go first without Windstrex. So Windstrex, on the other hand, again, can allow you to use separate spells as well. And I just want to go over a couple of those spells in particular when you're using this comp. Agile Leap is the number 1 on this list. And the reason for that is Agile Leap allows you to accelerate someone like Zatlux forward and then just save your ultimate spells for the boss fight. Now, it's important to note, and I use this strategy quite a bit, that when you go through waves, you're going to be reducing your cooldowns by 1. So for example, let's say you have Connor and you're stuck on that first wave and you can't just use Agile Leap and beat it. Well then, go ahead and use your buffs, but save an enemy until Connor gets to go a second time. So he'll go ahead and use his buffs, then he has to go 2 times before his cooldowns are up. Well then you go ahead and let him auto the second time around, get him an extra turn so that you don't wipe the wave with Zatlux first, and then he'll have a 1 turn left on his cooldown. You'll swap over to the next wave, and then boom, his second ability here is up again. So it's really important to note when you're going through Void Tower. The same thing works with Windstrex. Windstrex's ultimate here is 4 turn cooldown, and if you happen to get a passive proc from her, it actually goes down to a 3 turn cooldown. So it's exactly the same as Connor here, and you can use the exact same strategy. So that is the first initial comp, and again, as I mentioned, I used this to get through the first half of Void Tower because I did not have Blackhorn, and I did not have Desmond at that time, so I was not really interested in building a tankier comp. However, once I got to 63, as I mentioned, I was really interested in building a tankier comp because it was taking way too long to get the right rolls in order to beat through the rest of the stages, and so I moved into my comp that you saw on stream and in the video if you're watching, which was Blackhorn, Desmond, Charles, and Rickard. Now, I also use Rickard, or Charles and Hakron here. I also use Rickard in exchange with Desmond. Sometimes Desmond would be better, and sometimes Rickard would be better. Also, I sometimes use Mathesia depending on elemental advantage / disadvantage, so that the damage would be a little bit more diversified. And then on top of that, I also, and I want to make this really important, you don't just have to run a tank comp necessarily. Sometimes I would actually take out Rickard or Desmond and replace Cyrus or Jacob in there. And the reason for that is Cyrus has an ability immune, and Jacob has that invis / stealth, so they are inherently tanky and allow the units to actually survive and keep up with the tankier characters in the team. So I just want to go over why I think these characters are amazing and try to show you some clips of what makes them so strong. And I'm going to go ahead and start out with Charles down here because he is an excellent character. Now, Charles is a free-to-play unit, and I'll give you some suggestions for later on for some of the non-free-to-play units that you could use. But Charles is completely free-to-play and elite, very easy to summon. I actually used him at 5 Ascension because I didn't have the 6th one on the completion of Void Tower Hard. Now, what makes him so good is really there's two things. One, he gets an amazing amount of defense, an amazing amount of survivability, and he deals damage based on his defense, right? So this ultimate ability gets him a massive shield, oftentimes about 70% of his HP, and he's going to be dealing about, anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 damage, depending on what gear you have on him. And I just want to show you, my gear is nothing special for Charles. 2,400 defense is not that high, and he's not even in maxed out gear. I do have main stat defense, which is nice, but you can definitely get this, especially if you're clearing Void Tower Hard for the first time. Now, that's one part of his kit, right? The defense base, real survivable, damage dealing. The other part, and this is really important, and I want to specify this because it is honestly what makes Charles from really good to absolutely absurd, and that is 100% taunt on his basic. So not only is he doing, 4 to 5k true damage on his basic, in addition to the 50% damage there, but he's also constantly taunting the enemies. This allows you to get so much control and to basically remove someone from the fight. So let's say you have someone like Mathesia who's going to revive, and you don't want her to revive, or you have like Savannah who doesn't want to use an ultimate ability, well then you can completely avoid them from using their ults by constantly taunting them. And I want to go ahead and show you a clip of Charles and his maximum potential in that previous video just to show you what the taunt actually does. So as you saw, we were able to constantly taunt Ciara, which prevented her from using her ultimate ability, but also focused all of her damage on Charles. So for certain characters like Mathesia or Brand, you can just lock them out of using their ultimate. But for characters that are doing a ton of damage and you're lacking that survivability, it's really nice to taunt some of those damage dealers and split up some of the damage that they have. In this case, Bareth and Ciara were just nuking our Mathesia every single time we went in, and we prevented that with Charles's constant taunt. Again, there's the strength of Charles. Let's go ahead and head over to some of the other characters that I was using. Hakron, I think this one's pretty self-explanatory. I don't think I need to show any clips for this one. His value is really just in his stats, and that is getting that max HP up, and then getting the 20%, which actually turns into a 24% increase in defense rating across the whole team. And then, of course, he has that pretty solid hitting damage dealing spell on the A2 that scales off defense and gives you a taunt. It's a little backup taunt for when Charles doesn't land it. And again, 45% max HP, and the extra defense makes your whole team extremely survivable, makes Rickard and Charles do more damage, and then, of course, just an additional taunt sometimes. So again, an excellent character, completely free, so you don't need a replacement for this one. Fusible character. I did end up using Santis a little bit, like I think 1 floor, maybe 2. And she's just pretty basic, just for the poisons there. She's a really nice poison applier, so I'm not going to go too in-depth there. And then we have Blackhorn. And this one is, again, pretty self-explanatory because he's just a great healer. You're just going to use him for healing and cleansing. He also has the attack down. Some replacements for Blackhorn, however, are Mathesia, as you saw in that clip earlier with Charles. I was using Mathesia. She has that revive, which makes her excellent. A replacement for Mathesia and Blackhorn could be Rhaenyra. She basically has the same kit as Mathesia, except she has that defense up on the 3rd ability, which actually makes her a little bit more useful than Mathesia sometimes. In addition to that, her A2 that cleanses, that's actually on a lower cooldown. So that's really nice. Rhaenyra can easily replace Mathesia. And she can replace Blackhorn, but to a lesser degree. So if you happen to have, or don't have Blackhorn or Mathesia, go ahead and use Rhaenyra in those slots. And then we're going to move on to someone else that a lot of people had questions about, which is Rickard, and why Rickard is so awesome, and why I recommend building him. So there's a couple things with this kit that makes him so good. Is one, he's just an extremely tanky character. His damage is based on HP here with his ultimate. And then, of course, he has a 20% damage reduction upon taking damage. He's going to reduce that by 20%. So he's just an amazing high HP, but also reduces damage to himself. So he's really tanky. He has an occasional attack down here, and then he can periodically cleanse himself for additional heals. So he's really tanky, heals himself, and also cleanses himself, which is actually really often you'll have debuffs on your characters, because in Void Tower Hard, the enemies apply crit resistance down all the time. So you oftentimes will have a debuff to cleanse, and it gains some HP there. And then, of course, as I said, this is the main reason you're bringing him, is that he's going to be dealing true damage equal to 80% of his max HP to all enemies. And this is very important to understand, is this is not true damage, 80% of HP. Each target's going to take 80% of his HP in true damage. It's spread across all 4 units. So I'll show you a couple clips on why he's so good. But also the difference between, you know, maybe hitting 1 unit versus hitting 3 or 4, and the damage difference there. So as you saw from that clip, it was actually sort of like another Charles showcase, because between the two of them, they're super tanky, super survivable, and do a ton of damage. But as you saw, Rickard was dealing about 7k true damage to the full 4. And then when you're getting down to 1 to 2 characters, he's dealing, you know, maybe 28, 29k to 1 character. And it's important to note that he doesn't just do off of his 24k HP here, at least damage. It actually, you know, gets way more, because you're using Hackren in the same team as him, so his HP is boosting by 45%. It's important to note as well is that I do have the plus 15% HP here as well, so it might be a little bit hard to get those numbers for yourself, but there is a replacement for Rickard that I want to mention, who actually sometimes is better than Rickard. Actually, a lot of the time, Rock can be used to greater effect than Rickard. And the reason for this is when he's getting attacked, he's counterattacking, dealing 10% of max HP, which is massive, especially on stages with a lot of AoE. And then on his basic, he actually has a 50% chance to taunt, which is absolutely amazing. We already saw how powerful a taunt on basic was with Charles, but this one is also really nice for a backup. Maybe, you know, one of your characters is taking too much damage, so you just really want to, you know, move some damage from them to Rog. This is where the taunt comes in handy. And then he actually has a constant 30% HP regeneration on his second ability. And Rickard oftentimes will only get 10 to 20% of max HP on his second ability. And it's on a 2-turn cooldown, which is even less. And then his ultimate, which is a 1-turn cooldown less than Rickard's, actually deals a ton of damage based on his max HP. So again, Rog oftentimes becomes a little bit better than Rickard, albeit a little squishier if you're not able to get those heals out, because Rickard has a little bit better base stats. Now, again, Rog is definitely not to be slept on. Now, another character that I ended up using quite a bit, and this one is significantly less replaceable, because there's no one that can do what Desmond does, because they're like, you can use poisoners, but they're not even close to what Plague does in the game. Desmond is an absolute monster for Void Tower, as you saw from our Void Tower 100 stage video. He is just going to be stacking those plagues, and then if you get 50 stacks of plague, he will do literally 50 to 60%, maybe even more damage in their based on their current HP, but since it's 100%, it's a massive amount of damage, and then just completely wipe out the stage on his own. So you can use him as a solo damage dealer essentially throughout Void Tower, and unfortunately, he's not really that replaceable. Now, you can easily use Charles and Rickard, Hackren, and a healer for most of your Void Tower clear. If you do have those select stages where Desmond is awesome, definitely use Desmond if you have him. He makes things a lot easier for some of the stages. But again, he's not too replaceable, but you definitely don't absolutely need a Desmond. And for those of you that have not seen my previous video on Desmond, I do run him with crit rate, because his second ability here can smack for 10 to 12k damage if you have a lot of plague stacked. So he can definitely finish off a lot of the Void Tower waves on his own with this ability, and plague as well. And then, of course, we have, again, Mathesia, who I already went over briefly. but you know, she's just a solid unit. I don't think there's really anything too difficult to understand about her. She has a cleanse on her second skill. She has a lot of healing on her ultimate, and then occasionally the revival comes in handy. And then also, some people sleep on this trait here. And to be honest, I kind of slept on the trait as well when I first had her. But 5% of your max HP when they're using an ability every single turn is actually quite a bit of healing. And oftentimes will give you just that enough to survive to the next heal. Between her and Blackhorn, they are amazing healers. And definitely would suggest you run Mathesia, because this is the point where, for those of you that took the Mathesia in the rerolls, this is where you'll find a massive amount of use with them, because Mathesia is definitely better than Radira for a lot of Void Tower, but Blackhorn kind of takes the cake for the best healer. But definitely Mathesia is an excellent choice if you happen to get her from those rookie summons, which I did. So hopefully that gives you some insight into how to kind of build your own team composition and where to, you know, go with the Void Tower. Obviously, I didn't go over all the builds because that would make this video extremely long. Now, if you do want to see a in-depth guide on a certain character, let me know in the comments down below. If you want me to do a Rickard guide, if you want me to do a Rog or a Charles guide, I'm absolutely willing to do so. But again, hopefully this gives you some replacements for some of the teams that I was using and some idea on how to build your own Void Tower hard composition. So that will be it for this video. If you did enjoy, be sure to leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you for the next one.